Imagine a 20-year-old student, just a regular person walking down a street in Iraq on an ordinary day in 2024. He's probably thinking about his classes or, his family, maybe what he's going to do that weekend.
Right, just everyday things.
Exactly. What he doesn't know is that somewhere in a server room or a command center, a complex mathematical equation has just flagged his data profile. And in a fraction of a second, that algorithm curates a recommendation that ends his life.
It's a chilling reality.
It really is. So, welcome to today's deep dive. We are taking a hard look at something that sounds like the plot of a dystopian science fiction movie, but is actually a very real, very pressing crisis happening right now.
Yeah, happening today.
And for those of you listening, our mission today is to look past the physical battlefield explosions. We're focusing strictly on the AI governance perspective of modern conflict. We're asking, how is artificial intelligence fundamentally altering the way human beings make life or death decisions? And, maybe more importantly, how do you govern a system that moves faster than human thought?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Right. So to explore this, we're digging into a deeply sobering article titled The Algorithm of War: Preserving Judgment in Automated Conflict. It's by Branka Marisian, who is a senior fellow at CIGI and a researcher at Project Plowshares.
And it is a critical shift in perspective for anyone who's paying attention to technology right now, because for well over a decade, diplomats, technologists, they've debated autonomous weapons at the United Nations.
Right. Geneva, all those talks.
Exactly. But those conversations were almost always framed around preventing future harms, like down the road. The underlying kind of comforting assumption was that our existing legal frameworks, combined with having a human in the loop, would naturally keep these technologies in check.
But the article says otherwise.
Yeah, what this research demonstrates is that the future harms are, well, they're no longer theoretical. They are here today, and the current governance frameworks are struggling massively to keep up with the reality on the ground.
So to really understand why governance is so desperately needed, we have to start with the concrete reality of what is actually happening. The source material points to some devastating recent events that prove this is not just a philosophical debate. I mentioned that 20-year-old student earlier, Abdul-Rahman al-Rawi. A joint investigation by the Independent and Air Wars identified him as the first publicly known victim of an officially acknowledged AI-assisted airstrike.
And that distinction of being AI-assisted is vital here. We aren't talking about fully autonomous, sci-fi robots making their own rogue decisions like the Terminator.
Right.
We are talking about human operators using AI tools to assist their targeting, but the presence of a human didn't prevent a catastrophic failure of judgment.
Which brings up the other major incident detailed in the article. There was a recent U.S. strike on a girls' school in southern Iran, and at least 157 people were killed, and most of them were students.
Yeah, a horrific tragedy.
And just to be clear, we are strictly looking at the mechanics of this operation today, not taking any political sides whatsoever. The detail that really caught the attention of AI governance experts was the sheer volume and speed of the military action. The reports indicated some 1,000 targets were struck in the first 24 hours of that campaign.
Which is staggering. I mean, that volume is virtually impossible without rapid AI targeting. Human analysts simply cannot process raw intelligence, cross-reference the data, and generate actionable targets at that scale and speed.
They just don't have the capacity.
No, not even close. But here is where the governance failure really reveals itself. Subsequent reporting on that specific tragedy suggested that the AI didn't necessarily malfunction in a technical sense.
Wait, so the code didn't break?
Exactly. Instead, the primary culprit was outdated intelligence.
Oh, wow. So the algorithm was essentially doing its job, but it was being fed completely bad inputs.
Precisely. It exposes a massive vulnerability in how these systems are deployed in the real world. There is immense, almost crushing operational pressure on militaries to generate targets rapidly.
Because they want results.
Right. And consequently, they're increasingly relying on AI-enabled systems that are forced to operate on imperfect, flawed, or just stale data. And the algorithm doesn't necessarily know the data is stale. It just processes what it's given.
I'm trying to visualize the mechanics of this for you listening, especially if you're outside the military. It feels akin to relying on your car's autopilot feature.
That's a good way to look at it.
Like you're cruising down the highway, the system is keeping you in your lane, and you naturally start to trust it. But you aren't just driving on a sunny day. You are driving 100 miles an hour in dense fog.
Right.
Suddenly, the autopilot misinterprets a reflection on the road as clear space. And because you were moving so incredibly fast, and because the machine has been so reliable up to that point, you just don't have the reaction time to hit the brakes.
You're completely caught off guard. Yeah. In war, if the AI system is feeding you bad intelligence at a lightning-fast pace, the speed itself becomes the primary danger.
That autopilot analogy actually perfectly describes a well-documented psychological mechanism. It's called automation bias.
Automation bias.
Yeah. It is the human tendency to trust the output of a computer over our own senses or judgment, especially when we are under heavy cognitive load.
Which happens in combat all the time.
Exactly. The rules of war, meaning international humanitarian law, they exist to protect civilians. But those rules require human caution and verification. The speed of the vehicle in your analogy represents what militaries call the targeting cycle.
Okay.
AI accelerates that targeting cycle to a point where traditional safety mechanisms are stretched totally to the breaking point.
Okay, let's unpack this, because I want to play devil's advocate for a moment here.
Sure, go ahead. Militaries are explicitly designed to seek what they call a decision advantage. Proponents of these systems argue that a commander in a modern combat zone is already dealing with severe cognitive overload. There is too much noise, too much drone footage, too much signal intelligence.
It's an overwhelming amount of data, yes.
So if AI tools can process mountains of data to find a hidden threat, doesn't that actually improve situational awareness? Like, in a high-stakes conflict, isn't faster decision-making going to save the lives of your own troops?
Well, that is the core argument driving procurement right now. And, on the surface, it makes logical sense. AI systems do promise to identify hidden patterns at a scale no human could match. It appears to offer a clear military advantage.
Right, it sounds great on paper.
It does. But we have to separate the promises of a shiny new technology from the reality of human psychology. Military advantage should not be confused with actual better decision-making.
I see. Because processing data faster doesn't necessarily mean you are making a more ethical or accurate choice.
It goes much deeper than accuracy, actually. Speed changes the fundamental nature of the human thought process. The source material draws a crucial contrast here that really gets to the heart of the governance problem. It is the distinction between procedural judgment and reflective judgment.
Procedural versus reflective. Okay, I want to make sure I fully grasp this because it feels like a massive aha moment for understanding this whole topic. Walk me through the difference.
So, reflective judgment is what international law actually requires in war. It is not simply about making a fast decision. It requires a human being to weigh uncertainty.
Like looking at the gray areas.
Exactly. They have to interpret the broader context of a situation, they have to question the underlying assumptions of the intelligence they were looking at, and carefully balance the military necessity of a strike against the potential harm to civilians.
So reflective judgment is like the moral pause. It's the difference between asking the machine, can I hit this target? And asking yourself, should I hit this target?
That captures it perfectly. Reflective judgment is deeply human, and it requires time. But when AI accelerates the targeting cycle, it produces recommendations at a pace humans struggle to even comprehend. The opportunity for meaningful deliberation just evaporates.
It's just gone.
Yeah. And suddenly, human judgment transforms into something entirely procedural.
It just becomes a bureaucratic box to check.
Yes, exactly. The AI says strike, and the human operator, who is overwhelmed by a fire hose of data and under intense time pressure, simply verifies that the technical parameters were met and hits approve.
Wow.
The human is no longer making a moral decision, they are just completing a procedure. And this raises an important question for international law. Is meaningful human control even possible under the operational conditions that AI creates?
Because if the human is just a procedural rubber stamp, the control is entirely an illusion.
Precisely. It's an illusion of control.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though, because it's not just that the AI is moving fast. The AI isn't just handing the commander a neutral list of options on a clipboard. It is actively shaping the entire reality the commander is looking at.
It's curating the decision environment.
Yeah.
This is where user interface and software design become critical governance issues. I mean, AI does much more than generate a recommendation. It dictates what information is prioritized on the screen right in front of the operator.
Explain how that nudging actually works. Like, how does a screen design compromise human judgment?
Well, think about the psychological impact of a user interface in a high-stress environment. The system might highlight a target in bright red and assign it a 98% confidence score of being a hostile threat,
Right. And if a highly advanced supercomputer tells me it is 98% sure about something and I have 10 seconds to decide, I'm going to defer to the math every time.
which is automation bias in action again. The machine assigns a high mathematical probability of success, which makes the option appear incredibly credible. But equally important is what the AI leaves off the screen.
Oh, interesting.
The commander isn't seeing the ambiguous, messy data that the algorithm discarded to reach its conclusion. The technology gradually narrows the range of options that the human even considers acceptable.
So even if a human commander formally, like legally signs their name to authorize a strike, their independent judgment has already been heavily constrained by the system's underlying design.
Yes. When an operator is sitting in a control room, realistically questioning the outputs of a highly complex black box algorithm becomes almost impossible.
You can't just stop the war to debug the code.
Exactly. You cannot pause a fast-moving military operation to call an engineer and ask how the machine learning model weighted a specific piece of thermal imaging versus, say, cell phone data. You just trust the machine.
And hope it's right.
Yeah. And the cascading problem here is that when decisions are made this fast, mistakes spread faster. A flaw in the algorithm's logic doesn't just cause one tragic incident. It compounds across hundreds of targets before anyone realizes what is happening.
Like the 1,000 targets in 24 hours we talked about earlier.
Exactly. And as the research explicitly notes, it is civilians in dense urban environments where distinguishing combatants from non-combatants is already incredibly difficult, who bear the fatal cost of those compounded mistakes.
Which completely reframes the entire AI governance perspective for me. If the human at the end of the chain is essentially compromised by the speed, the cognitive overload, and the design of the interface, you can't just blame that one human operator when things go horribly wrong.
Yeah.
You have to look at how the entire machine is governed.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, governance has to extend far beyond the moment a weapon is actually employed. Accountability must begin long before a commander ever authorizes the use of force.
It starts in a laboratory, really. It starts with the developers.
Yes, it starts with the data selected to train the AI systems in the first place. You have to ask, what biases existed in that training data? Was the system trained in a pristine virtual simulation or on the messy reality of urban conflict?
Which are two very different things.
Very different. Accountability continues with the assumptions built into the code itself. The developers writing these algorithms often do so with the goal of maximizing efficiency, right? And they may have absolutely no background in international humanitarian law.
The source material also points out a huge vulnerability when it comes to military culture, specifically institutional incentives.
This is a vital piece of the governance puzzle. Because if a military institution actively rewards speed and efficiency above all else, it is creating a culture that actively discourages reflective judgment.
Yeah.
Imagine an officer who generates 100 targets a day being praised and promoted, while an officer who generates only 10 targets, because they took the time to verify the AI's math and question the intelligence, is viewed as a bottleneck.
The institution is basically punishing caution.
Exactly. Treating human judgment as just a procedural requirement to satisfy the lawyers is a massive governance failure.
And honestly, this connects directly to the corporate world, too. For anyone listening who manages intelligent systems in a business, the parallel is identical. If a corporate manager is handed an AI tool to review resumes or approve loans or flag fraudulent accounts, and the company rewards processing volume over accuracy, how can that manager realistically push back against the AI?
They often can't. The dynamic of automation bias mixed with institutional pressure to go fast exists in both arenas. For governance to actually work, whether in a command center or a corporate office, operators cannot just be handed an AI tool and told to optimize for speed.
You need support.
They have to be given comprehensive training to understand where and how the system fails. They need the physical time to evaluate the outputs. And crucially, they need the institutional authority to actively critique and reject AI recommendations without stalling their careers.
So what does this all mean for the policymakers and military leaders in charge right now? We know that UN debates over international treaties take years, and negotiating new global agreements on autonomous weapons is politically agonizing. But states don't have to wait for a global treaty to act.
No, they don't.
What are the concrete, actionable steps that governments can take today to build a blueprint for protecting human judgment?
Well, the foundational step states must take today is demanding robust transparency. Now, the research acknowledges that militaries have legitimate security concerns. No one expects them to publish sensitive operational source code online.
Right, that would just be reckless.
Exactly. However, governments must radically improve transparency regarding how these AI-enabled systems are tested, how they are validated against legal obligations before deployment, and how they are monitored once they are actually in the field.
Because without transparency into the testing parameters, accountability is just a buzzword. You can't hold anyone responsible if you don't even know the rules the machine was supposed to follow.
Furthermore, states must implement strict traceability and lifecycle oversight.
Traceability. This sounds a bit technical. What does life cycle oversight actually look like in practice?
Think of it as creating the digital equivalent of an airplane's black box for every single algorithm used in combat. Currently, the sheer velocity of AI operations is erasing the paper trail of decision-making.
Ah, I see.
So traceability means mandating meticulous documentation of decisions made throughout the entire life cycle of the AI.
Meaning we need a record of far more than just the name of the person who pushed the final button.
Much more. We need records from the developers who trained it, the commanders who deployed it, the operators who used it, and the legal advisors who reviewed it at every stage.
That's a lot of data.
It is, but this documentation must be structured in a way that enables genuine, independent review, not just internal classified record-keeping that never sees the light of day. To govern these systems, we need to be able to reconstruct an operation and trace exactly how human judgment was either enabled or constrained by the technology in that specific moment.
So we can actually learn from it.
Right. We need rigorous post-strike reviews that aren't afraid to identify when the algorithm failed.
Because if we don't build that black box, if we don't force that transparency, the blur of speed will just continue to erase accountability entirely. And we have to remember why we are even having this conversation today.
We really do.
Abdul-Rahman al-Rawi, the 20-year-old student killed in Iraq, he wasn't an abstract debate topic for diplomats in Geneva. He wasn't a hypothetical data point in a machine learning model. He was a human being.
His death puts a very real face on a debate that has remained far too theoretical for far too long. In the coming months and years, states are going to be making monumental decisions regarding the dialogue around military AI. The absolute core question before them is how to ensure that human decision-makers retain the capacity to exercise careful, informed, and independent judgment in environments that are increasingly curated, shaped, and accelerated by AI. The safety of civilians in the age of intelligent conflict depends entirely on how they answer that question.
It really makes you stop and evaluate the trajectory we are currently on. For you listening, think about this. If we purposefully design AI systems that process information so incredibly fast that human brains couldn't possibly keep up, are we subtly, intentionally programming our own loss of ethical agency? Before we completely hand over the steering wheel to an algorithm, we have to ask a profound question. When the machine is the one deciding what is militarily necessary, who is really fighting the war, the human or the machine? Thank you for listening to AI Governance, Strategy, and the Future of Intelligent Organizations. Before you go, we'd love to hear your perspective. What stood out to you most in today's discussion? Do you agree with the conclusions or do you see the issue differently? Leave comment and join the conversation. Your insights often inspire future episodes. If you found this episode valuable, follow the podcast for weekly conversations exploring AI governance, strategy, responsible AI, and the future of intelligent organizations. And if you know someone who would benefit from this discussion, please share the episode with them. Together, we're building a community that goes beyond the headlines to understand what AI really means for organizations and society.